Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. We're going to be talking about pass catchers who were drafted in the class of 2022 and what their dynasty value is. But there is a ton of news. Today was the franchise tag deadline. Dennis, did you get your tag in and submitted before 4 o'clock Eastern?
You know, I decided I was going to let myself walk. I'm a little expensive going into this year, getting up there in age. I just don't know if I'm worth the average annual value of the balance of this contract.
Well, that is tough to hear, but, you know, there were 8 players now that ended up with the franchise tag, most of them on defense. I'll run through that really quick. The Chiefs used the tag on corner L'Jarius Sneed. The Panthers tagged pass rusher Brian Burns. The Ravens tagged pass rusher Justin Madubuike. Buccaneers tagged safety Antoine Winfield. Jaguars tagged Josh Allen. Not that Josh Allen, the pass rusher Josh Allen. The Bears tagged corner Jalen Johnson. Patriots, a rare franchise tag move for them, tagged safety Kyle Duggar. We had already seen T. Higgins get the tag right at the beginning. One other offensive player got it, and that was wide receiver Michael Pittman. Do you think that's a good move for the Colts?
Yeah, I think the Colts want to keep Pittman, and they're working on a deal. It feels like a placeholder. I think that Pittman is going to come back. They'll get a deal done. That team is headed in the right direction. So unless Anthony Richardson has spent his recovery time trash talking Michael Pittman, I think it's going to be the Richardson to Pittman show this year. They've got a couple other good weapons in Josh Downs and Alec Pierce, and they have Jonathan Taylor. All they got to do is keep Anthony Richardson from getting injured, and this offense should be able to put up some points, not just for NFL victories, but for fantasy as well.
Yeah, will be interesting to see, so we'll take a look at that. We are also in the season where we're getting a couple of re-signings up ahead of what we expect will be some free agent madness at this time next week when the legal tampering period is in full effect. But a couple of big offensive deals today. First, Mike Evans, 2 years, $52 million back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with Higgins getting the tag, Pittman getting the tag, and now Evans re-upping with the Buccaneers. Seems like kind of the top 3 potential free agent wide receivers now off the market. Do you like this for the Bucs?
I love it for Mike Evans. I'd like to see him finish his career there. My concern is it kind of feels like a wink and a nod towards, hey, I did this, now get something done with Baker. But yet he was saying he wanted to go and play with an elite quarterback. And just between you and me and our tens of listeners, I don't know that Baker Mayfield is an elite quarterback. So I thought Baker paired really well with him. This offense looked like it was going places once the offensive line got itself under control. So maybe they bring Baker back. I would say we're definitely leaning on the, I would probably put it at a 65, 70% chance that Baker is going to be back in Tampa, because let's face it, Baker doesn't really have the cachet to go somewhere and say, hey, I want a 7-year deal, or, I think he's going to be lucky to get 3.
Well, unless they, if he wants an elite quarterback, unless they're making some blockbuster trade or making a blockbuster trade up, they're not really in the right position to make that kind of a draft pick. I mean, maybe you get Kirk Cousins. They seem like far from the leaders in that market. Maybe you'll get another guy that we'll talk about in a minute here, but Baker was a good fit.
Is Kirk elite though? I mean,
well, that's the thing. You're talking about an elite quarterback.
I think Kirk's pretty good. I don't know that he's elite.
Well, and I read too, Minnesota would be interested in making a run at Baker Mayfield if they lose Kirk Cousins. So it kind of tells you where we're at there. The other big signing, the Texans brought back Dalton Schultz, this time on a 3-year, $36 million deal. I thought he looked good in his one season kind of a prove it deal there. I think it's good for CJ Stroud in this offense. Probably bad for those of us that held out some hope that Brevin Jordan was inching closer to a breakout season.
I mean, so Schultz flashed in his, last year or so in Dallas. Last couple of years, 78 catches, 57 catches, and 63 in 2020. I think he's a good tight end. He's a reliable tight end. He's a veteran presence. I think he's going to add something to the team that, maybe some of these young guys aren't going to be there for. Brevin Jordan, I get it. I love the athletic tight ends too. And sometimes they just don't pan out. The way that Houston is going, it feels like Jordan is going to be there for the next couple of years as the second tight end, but he's not going to outproduce Dalton Schultz. He may have a couple games where he breaks a big play because he does have that type of athletic ability, but he's on the smaller.
So he's going to be the Texans' Donald Parham, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now, I like the re-signing of Schultz, especially if I'm Tank Dell or Nico Collins or even Xavier Hutchinson manager.
Yeah, and I think it'll be good. He had some good moments there. I think it's good for CJ Stroud, gives them kind of that good veteran pass catching presence at tight. And Jason Kelce made it official that he was retiring. We had talked about a couple of weeks ago what we thought of him when he was retiring. I thought it was an incredible, closing press conference and speech. So I'm going to put it to you like this: do you think he makes the Hall of Fame?
I think he does. Again, I always go to the question, at any point in your career were you considered the best at your position? And I think Kelce was, not just for a year. I think he's had a pretty long run that he's been considered one of the top center in the game. Even at, what is he now, 35 years old, 36 years?
Yeah,
he still showed the athleticism to pull from the center position and get out on the wings and deliver blocks. I think that the Hall can get a little bit diluted sometimes, and so for me, it's like, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Is he a second ballot Hall of Famer? I think he's an early opportunity Hall of Famer, but I'd have to go and kind of look at a little bit deeper. They won a Super Bowl. They made another one.
I think he will make it on the first ballot. And that doesn't always happen with offensive line. It's not the most glory position, but he has such a beautiful outsized personality off the field, and with that podcast that he does with his brother and some of the ways that they've given back, I think he's somebody that's gonna be remembered and will ride that wave. I'm hoping that maybe he'll do some broadcast stuff, because he's really a funny guy and they do really well on their podcast opposite each other. I'd be curious to see if he turns that into a more what
if they start doing games together?
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like Travis is gonna retire just yet, even though Did you know he's the exact same age as Rob Gronkowski? Kind of just tells you how those guys get beat up at that position. It's kind of unreal. Speaking of tight ends, so we had some signings, we have some taggings, we've also started to see some players released. There was one big name that I'll save for the end. In terms of some other names that got released, CJ Uzoma, who had signed with the Jets a couple of years ago, I almost forgot he was on the Jets, was due an $11 million cap hit, has been released. Will Dissly, an interesting one. The Seahawks released him and Jamal Adams and at safety, but Will Dissly, Noah Fant's now a free agent. They've released Will Dissly. They went from having a pretty set tight end situation to I'm curious what they're going to do at that position. They do have their 3 receivers, 2 running backs, so it's not like they're hurting for weapons. But do either of those guys you think have any juice in this next fantasy season?
Not for fantasy. I mean, we saw Uzoma, he was summarily passed up as a fantasy asset by Tyler Conklin. Dissly was just a guy that would flash every now and again, but he didn't consistently provide fantasy goodness. So I don't think either one of them, they were both desperation plays at best when you played them. It was I don't have anything else. I'm going to plug this guy in my lineup and hope he catches 3 for 30 and a touchdown, 2 for 20 and a touchdown. I like it for the Jets. I think it bodes well for Jeremy Ruckert, the young tight end out of Ohio State. He came in, he kind of had to get settled in.
Unless the Jets draft Brock Bowers, as has been mocked to them.
So, Ruckert is a fairly athletic tight end. He's not in the Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, kind of specter, but he's a good. He's got good size and good hands. As far as Seattle, it'll be, I want to see how their offense shakes out. You got a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. You're coming off trading away everybody's All-American a couple seasons ago, and you're just trying to, put the offense back together now and be competitive again. Who would have thought that after that trade, Drew Lock would have a job and Russell Wilson would get cut.
So. Well, he's a free agent, so we don't know for sure that Drew Lock does have a job. I mean, he could. You just don't know. Yeah, it's interesting with Jamal Adams being released. They have their own kind of big marquee trade that didn't yield probably as much fruit as they were hoping. But
they let their other safety, Quandre Diggs, go as well.
Yep. So it'd be interesting. Obviously they went with defensive-minded head coach, and what he did with the Ravens defense last year was pretty impressive, maybe wanting to do a little bit of a different scheme, get some different personnel. So we will see what happens there. You alluded to it. Probably the worst kept secret in the entire NFL. Russell Wilson was finally officially told he will be officially released. Can't happen until next Wednesday when the new league year starts. The Broncos will absorb $85 million in dead cap over 2 seasons. I spend most days wondering how George Payton still has a job, and that's only intensified. Those of you that follow me on Twitter know that I wasn't super pleased with the direction of the team, remain not super pleased. Denver has major salary cap issues, major questions going all along. I'm just going to say right now, prayers up for whichever poor quarterback prospect ends up in Denver, because I don't think we're going to be good for quite some time. Especially until they turn over that front office. For Russell Wilson, I mean, there's going to be suitors, because there's more teams, it seems like right now, that don't have a quarterback than there are top prospects in the draft or top free agent choices. What do you expect?
So Denver, I think, has some options that are going to be relatively affordable. You've got Jarrett Stidham. You're picking at 12, right?
I thought we were friends.
You're picking at 12.
We're picking at 12 right now.
So potentially JJ McCarthy might be there, or Michael Penix. I don't think Bo Nix is a first round guy.
Denver just said, "Hold my beer." You haven't met our GM.
But also, and this is where you're going to be most mad at me. If so, Washington's drafting a quarterback. If I'm them, I'm looking to see, can I move Sam Howell? And let's send Sam Howell to Denver. Let's see, he's cheap. He's a late round pick. He's got a couple years left on his contract. He's got a season of starting experience. I'd rather have Sam Howell than Jarrett Stidham. My concern, though, is I think that Sam Howell might be more of a risk taker than Sean Payton cares for. The other option, and this is where you hate me, I think, is Mac Jones. Mac he's a game manager, and he generally plays it safe with the ball. And I think that's what Sean Payton does. That's what Drew Brees did not make a ton of mistakes. Mac Jones got screwed by coaching in New England. And I never thought I would say that about a Bill Belichick team, but they ruined his confidence. They I think completely mismanaged not just Mac, but the offense. I think there's something there with Mac, and I think it can be rebuilt. He's not a great athlete, and he's not like going to throw at 90 yards. But I think generally he's a guy that if you put him in a decent position, he's going to make the right decision for you. Turnovers happen. The defense gets paid too. They're professionals. So, but I do think those are two guys. I mean, I like either one of those scenarios much better than Trey Lance to Minnesota.
I mean, the good news is they said Denver's going to make a strong play for Michael Thomas when he gets released from New Orleans, so that Greg Dulcich will have a rehab buddy, somebody that they can just sit in the training room and get iced down together and talk about all the balls they're not available to catch.
Hang out in side-by-side ice tubs.
Yeah. You know what? I'm at the point in time, it's been a decade since Denver was a good team. It's probably been longer than that since they were a fun team to watch, because I love Peyton Manning. I'm grateful for Super Bowl 50. That team was not particularly fun to watch. He had some struggles that last year. We actually had meaningful games started by Brock Osweiler that year. Even toward the tail end of the season before, he had gotten hurt, and that offense, in 2013, it was an incredible offense to watch. In 2014, it was okay. In 2015, was a lot of prayers up that the defense could keep a team under 10 points so that we could get enough points to win. And hey, that was a winning formula. Again, incredibly grateful to have won a Super Bowl. Not too many teams get that, but I think Denver has tried to patchwork it over for a decade. I'm of the opinion now that you tear it down to the studs, and it's 2 or 3 years of being garbage. My only concern is, as I've said, I think Denver needs to overhaul the front office. And then I also question, is that what Sean Payton wants to do? Because it sure seemed like when it was getting to the point in time where New Orleans was going to have to go in that direction, he bailed out of there. So I don't know. It's such a disaster. I hope Russ lands in a spot, has a great year, and takes the team to the playoffs just to stick it to Denver's front office, because we're an embarrassment right now. Just an absolute embarrassment. Let's before we shift to these pass catchers, let's talk combine really quick. I'm going to break it down into two parts, because the first up is this combine was probably more notable than even in past years for the top prospects that declined to participate, not just in the on-field drills, but we even had like Marvin Harrison skipping media availability. Caleb Williams refused to do the medical testing. Word came out later, only 19 of the 32 head coaches bothered to go to the combine. Has a lot of people asking whether the combine is slowly getting phased out. Did you find any of these things alarming? Do you think this is just a new reality? How did this hit you?
So this is where I become a grumpy old man. I think that, so my initial reaction to Caleb Williams is nothing says sub 6 foot quarterback like I'm not going to let you measure me in public. You know, nothing says 175-pound quarterback like Jaden Daniels saying I'm not going to let you weigh me in public. So those things to me are concerning. Nothing says diva wide receiver like, hey, I'm not even going to go to the combine. Well, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to stay away from him. I'm not going to talk to him. I'm going to be invisible than Marvin Harrison, what he did. It just to me is, and don't get me wrong, I love Marvin Harrison. He's one of my guys. But if I can step back from that a little bit, players have worked tirelessly to take control of their own opportunities and situations. And while I want them to go to the combine, like I loved last year, CJ Stroud saying, look, I don't care who else is throwing. I'm going to throw because I'm going to show you I'm the best guy here. Well, none of the top 3 did that this year. And last year's Bryce Young and CJ Stroud throwing battle, I thought was fantastic. You want these guys to not be afraid, but you also have to respect their desire to maintain control over, you know, their own sort of interview process. Is the combine going to become something of the past? I don't think so, because not everybody is going to be able to wield that type of power. And JJ McCarthy, his performance at the combine now moved him up. John Hansen at SiriusXM and Fantasy Points Data, which shout out to the Fantasy Points Data Suite. I love it. It's fantastic. Definitely worth the price of admission. Hansen has him at QB2. And Brett Whitefield, who's another Fantasy Points Data guy, who is like, he was one of the drivers behind the Fantasy Points Data Suite. JJ McCarthy is his QB1 in this class. I don't know, those feel like they're a little high, but also maybe they're right. McCarthy, to me, I saw him comp to Alex Smith, and that felt right. Okay arm, not the biggest arm.
Didn't he? Smith was a number 1 overall pick, I think.
He was,
so. But
as a quarterback, he was, you know, didn't have a great arm. Yes, he had some mobility. He wasn't a guy that you were hanging your hat on for your fantasy teams at pretty much any point in his career. His big year in Kansas City kind of came a little unexpectedly, and he was immediately discarded the following year for
Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes. So
Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. That's not like he got tossed over. Well, you know, I do agree with you to some extent. I will say this more of a reference that basketball fans will get, but some of the things that have come out about Caleb Williams and the his father has asked about like ownership stake and things give me a little Lonzo Ball vibes. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but it just, you know, maybe these draft processes are too long and too public. It seems like the big part of focus for a lot of the clubs and everything is being able to do these one-on-one interviews anyway. And by all accounts, even the people that didn't want to do public testing did interviews and met with teams. Right.
So that's the thing. You said 19 of 32 head coaches didn't even go.
No, 19 coaches went, but 19, that means we had the real public one about, oh, Mike McCarthy's not going to go. Robert Salt. Well, 13 head coaches didn't bother to go.
And I think some of it's it comes down to, you're going to get these guys in-house anyways. You pay your scouting team to do their job. And should they go? Maybe, but I could see like what, Kevin Stefanski isn't there to interview the top 32 prospects because Browns don't have a first round pick.
Yeah.
And the deeper you get into the draft, then, the wider the options of who you may choose is going to be. So now you're going to start, and there's more access to data around the players. And while coaches have always had video of the players accessible to them, you see a lot more about who the player is now because of social media. Teams have somebody who watches every player they're considering drafting. They have alerts set for that player's social media, and they're keeping an eye on them, almost like having a private eye follow them.
So let me flip to the other part, which is we did see some guys go out there, and some, we're impressive. We have a new 40-yard dash record, Xavier Worthy getting a 4.21. So, Dennis, do you have 2 or 3 guys that really impressed you that you're going to be watching now as they go into the draft?
Well, I'm curious to see, like, is Sam Hartman the new Head and Shoulders guy? I liked. So I'm not going to be surprised if no running backs go in the first 2 rounds. That being said, Jonathan Brooks and
Trey
Benson both look like they could be 3-down guys. Corum, he's been being comped favorably to Devonta Freeman. They're roughly the same size, ran the same 40. Freeman had a few good years. The downside is that those small guys, they tend to, they're going to, we like to hashtag 2-3 year window it. They may be even shorter. We saw that with like Philip Lindsay. Now he was an undrafted free agent, but he didn't last a super long time. Xavier Worthy, honestly, I wish he would have ran a 4.32 or 4.31, because these guys that set these records
never pan out.
They don't. It's like the guys that go in and set the bench press records. I remember when Mike Kudla out of Ohio State set the record at 45.
But you never know. No one pans out until they do. You got to hold out hope. As soon as I saw that time, I made a mental note that he will be a Raider in, what is it, 2024?
The ghost of Al Davis is going to walk that card up himself. Now, I like Worthy. My concern is he going to be Will Fuller? Is he going to be Deshaun Jackson? Is he going to be Jameson Williams?
Those guys, well, we haven't seen, we'll get to Jameson Williams in a minute, but the first 2 you mentioned may not have had real long runs, but they had some big bang in fantasy at times. I mean, you could do worse than that. I was more thinking the combine record that he broke was John Ross, and I don't remember a single time that I would have felt good having to start him in my lineup. No offense to John Ross.
Yeah, I concur.
Well, that's the guys that are coming. We're going to finish up the look of class of 2022 by looking at pass catchers. We're going to look at receivers first and then a few tight ends. As always, they go in draft order. Some of these receivers will be easy to talk about. Some of them will take a little bit longer. But first off the board, drafted number 8 overall in the first round was Drake London, who went to the Atlanta Falcons. He's had 2 very similar years. He's played 15 or more games in both of the seasons, seen over 110 targets in both seasons. Last year, he caught 69 passes for 905 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but the Atlanta pass offense wasn't incredible. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they do. And man, if they get Kirk Cousins, could be wheels up for him and Kyle Pitts in an even bigger way. I still like him as a wide receiver too. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, if they get anybody that can throw the ball with any consistency, it should be wheels up. He finished as wide receiver 36 last year, wide receiver 38 as a rookie. He's had 110 or more targets both seasons. His catch rate's about 62%. He just hasn't quite got that elite pass catcher volume, but nobody in Atlanta was getting that over the last couple seasons. I want to see more from him. I feel he's got size to be a wide receiver one. I think I'm comfortable with him as a projecting him maybe is somewhere between 18 and 24. But I get a little nervous because we're now, there were a few questions about him coming out. Was he going to translate? He should. We've seen some big games. Let's see him put it all together. But now he's got to do it, learning a new offense with a new quarterback. I like Drake London a lot. If I can get him as a top, wide receiver 18 to 24, that's a sweet spot for him.
Next up, taken number 10 overall by the Jets, Garrett Wilson. And despite the fact that he has had negligible quarterback play both seasons, he's seen 315 career targets, 178 receptions, 2,145 yards, only 7 touchdowns. But again, he got 4 snaps of Aaron Rodgers and has seen mostly Zach Wilson. I like Garrett Wilson as top 5, at least for me in wide receiver. How about you?
Yeah, it's tough to put him. I'm going to have Jefferson, Chase, and CeeDee Lamb ahead of him. Yeah. I probably have him at 4. He was my wide receiver 3 for Dynasty last year. I like that he's going to get, theoretically, a healthy Aaron Rodgers. He had 168 targets last year. He's got to get his catch rate up, over that 60% range, 56.5%, and get a little more yardage on the catches that he is getting. Garrett Wilson has, he's been making chicken salad out of chicken feathers for a couple years now.
Hopefully he'll actually get Aaron Rodgers this year and have a real quarterback. Third on the list, another guy that's kind of had to make do with medium quarterback play, and that is Chris Olave. Was also a first-round pick, went number 11 overall. He struggled at times to stay on the field, missed games in each of his first 2 seasons, but he did see an increase in targets to 138, receptions to 87, and yardage to 1123 in his second year, 5 touchdowns playing with Derek Carr. I like him as a wide receiver too.
Yeah, Olave is the guy there. We see the occasional blow-up game from Rashid Shaheed. Juwan Johnson will have a game. There'll be times when Alvin Kamara is getting 15 targets. But the consistent guy, despite being, a downfield guy, is Olave. At 138 targets last year, 87 catches. His YPA dropped from 14.5 to 12.9. Let's see what Derek Carr can do now with Joe Lombardi gone. Can they push the ball down the field a little more?
Lombardi wasn't there last year either.
Oh, wasn't he?
He's sadly in Denver.
Oh,
I don't remember who their offensive.
They did bring in a new OC this year.
Yeah, they did. They brought in Clint Kubiak, which that could be interesting. A lot of it depends on how closely he hews to his dad, Gary. But Gary Kubiak, when he was an offensive coordinator in Denver and Houston, San Francisco, they had some pretty robust passing games.
Yeah, and Olave, he's good in all phases of the receiving game. He works hard blocking. He can get open with speed. He can get open with route running. He's got good hands.
Next up, drafted number 12 overall, 4th receiver off the board was Jameson Williams. And this is probably one of the more interesting ones going into year 3 due to that knee injury. Almost a little bit of a red shirt kind of year. His first year, he was active for 5 or 6 games, only caught 1 pass, was for 41 yards and a touchdown, though. Last year had that 6-game suspension to start the season, ended up coming on a little bit late, looked pretty decent in the playoffs, but only 42 targets, got 24 for 354 and 2 touchdowns. There's some free agents there. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta are probably 1 and 2 in that passing game. How are you feeling about Jameson Williams?
So we're at the point where we need him to take a step when it comes to route running. He's playing the Will Fuller role good. He runs far and he runs fast. But I want to see more than 42 targets. I need to, at 57% catch rate, because of what he does, I don't know that I'm hankering for, you got to get that up. That's pretty good for a guy who does most of his work downfield. And the further you go downfield, the harder the passes are to catch. I like Jameson Williams a lot. He's a little bit skinny, and so I do get a little nervous because they like to run him now and again too. And he's probably 190 pounds, 185 pounds. I'd like to see them not do that with him. Let David Montgomery run that, or Jahmyr Gibbs. Those guys are used to taking those hits. I think he's probably a wide receiver 4 with high-end wide receiver 4 upside, because you're not going to get a ton of consistency out of him.
I still feel like, if you took him high in rookie drafts, which you had to take him fairly high if you wanted to get him in rookie drafts, I'm still probably holding him, waiting to see how this third season plays out, because I still have some hope. There's a few guys coming up on this list for whom hope has left my body. But I still have some hope that he's possibly on an upward trajectory. He's part of a good offense, a good young offense. I think there's still some potential. Following him, taken number 16 overall, was Jahan Dotson, who went to the Commanders. He had an okay rookie season, had some really high highs, caught 7 touchdowns on 35 receptions, pretty good percentage. Last year, despite at times a robust pass offense, his role was a little unclear. He started 16 games, saw 83 targets, only caught 49, had 518 yards, which is actually 14 more receptions and 5 fewer yards than he had as a rookie. Also only caught 4 touchdowns. His yards per reception went way down. His catch percentage went way down. The Washington Commanders are in the midst of a little bit of an offensive revolution, but Dennis, I'm not a Jahan Dotson believer. I would have him probably down wide receiver 4, 5, 2. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I do think that there's going to be an opportunity for him to step up into that wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside, especially if Samuel goes somewhere else and they can get an offense that isn't just chucking it wildly. Last year, I know they led the league in pass attempts, but they also let Howell be under pressure a whole lot, and I don't know if his decision making was the best when he's facing.
Come on down, number 2 overall pick.
So, I think Dotson, he does seem to have a nose for the end zone. 11 touchdowns over 2 seasons is pretty good, especially productive in his rookie year. He's in a position where Terry McLaurin was older coming into the league, and Dotson is in a position where he may be able to work his way into the heir apparent role to Terry McLaurin. If he can develop chemistry with whoever the new quarterback is, likely Drake May, then potentially he could step up and be a more consistent wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 type of player. But a lot of it's going to come down to how is that offense. The challenge we had with Washington last year was, yes, they threw the ball a lot, but their pass funnel was wide. They threw it to a lot of players, and we need them to narrow that down. And if that happens, I think Dotson could be a real beneficiary.
Next up, Treylon Burks went number 18 in the first round. A lot of people were hoping he could kind of be an A.J. Brown replacement. We just have not seen it. Another guy who struggled to stay on the field. Started 9 games last year, only saw 30 targets, caught 16 passes for 221 yards, no touchdowns. I am kind of out on Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's going to happen for him.
I don't think you can sell him for anything, but
yeah, he's made some plays. We've seen it flash, but it just isn't consistent from play to play, from quarter to quarter, from series to series. When he does flash, he ends up, getting the wind knocked out of him because he landed on his back and now he misses 2 quarters because his ribs are sore. It seems like there's always something with him. He was wide receiver 117 last year, wide receiver 85 as a rookie. It's one of those things where if you are in a deep rebuild and you're just looking to get something cheap to see if it like he's lottery ticket level right now. If you might be able to, there's a chance you could go offer a 4th round pick for him and get him. And maybe it works out. Probably it doesn't. But, I saw, you remember we had the Corey Coleman, Josh Dotson, Laquan Treadwell draft. And, I think we're going to see Treylon Burks talked about in the same sentence as those guys, the way it's going, and maybe Quentin Johnston.
We'll get to him when we get to last year's rookies in a few weeks. But next up, second round now, 34 overall, Christian Watson went to the Green Bay Packers. He's another guy who has struggled to stay on the field, has only managed to start 20 games in his 2 seasons. He's had some big play moments, had a lot as a rookie with Aaron Rodgers. Last year, 53 targets, caught 28 for 422 yards and 5 touchdowns. But, Dennis, I'd rather have Jaden Reed. I'd rather have Dontavian Wicks. I'd rather have Romeo Doubs, who is in this class that we'll talk about in a minute. To me, Christian Watson is a guy that still has good name value that I would be trying to sell high this offseason.
He's just one of these guys that's a specimen. He's big and he's fast. And it didn't seem like he was as drop prone as MVS. But, he made a couple big drops early in his career, and he's had some monster games. He looks good in stretches, but he can't stay healthy. He's got his hamstrings just don't hold up. If he can figure that out and he can start to get through a full season and be out there for, 85, 90% of the snaps, the opportunity is going to be there for him. They are going to go to him over Jaden Reed and over Dontavian Wicks and over Romeo Doubs, just because physically he has all of their best traits in one package. But he just hasn't put it together. I fear he's going to be one of these guys that keeps showing flashes. He has, misses 3 to 9 games a year because of these weird injuries. And then in year 4, he puts up 16 games with 140 targets and 100 catches and 10 touchdowns and gets a new contract.
And then never sees the field again.
Right.
Next up, with pick number 43 in the second round, Wan'Dale Robinson went to the New York Giants. Didn't have a great rookie year, but you know what? He was actually surprisingly decent second year. Saw 78 targets, started 8 games, played in 15, 60 receptions, 525 yards, and a touchdown. I kind of like him, in the wide receiver 4 range. I thought he had something. The Giants, obviously a team that needs some pass catchers.
He's set up to be their slot receiver. He fills that position well. He's a quick route runner. He's very shifty, has good hands. He caught 77% of his passes last year. I'd like to see his yards per reception broach the 10 yards mark. 9.9 as a rookie, 8.8 last year. Those are practically handoffs. Now I get it. He spent most of the year playing with Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor. But let's see if we can get those numbers up. He's a guy that can be one of those possession type receivers, high volume, chain mover. Maybe isn't going to score a lot of touchdowns, but if you're in a point per first down league, he could be one of those guys.
Next up, we have George Pickens, went in the second round, number 52 overall. He had a pretty big jump in year 2, saw 106 targets, caught 63 for 1140 and 5 touchdowns. A lot of games where Deontay Johnson was out and Pat Freiermuth was out. I'm going to say Pickens is a guy for me that I'm selling high because with the Arthur Smith of it all and everything else, I just don't trust it.
Yeah, Pickens is... he could be fool's gold. He could be a lottery winner. He just there's definitely, like, we don't usually see a Pittsburgh wide receiver behave like Pickens does until they're in like their 7th, 8th, 9th year, and then they start to act weird. Pickens has acted weird virtually his whole career. Makes some amazing catches, misses some balls he should catch. Sometimes his effort isn't quite there. I could see him stepping up and becoming the wide receiver 1 just because he puts up a ton of yards and has the ability to get into the end zone. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. He had 1,100 yards last year on 63 catches. Yeah, I don't know how easy it's going to be to, duplicate an 18.1 yards per reception. But I could see him consistently in the 14 to 15 range. If he starts all 17 games with a decent quarterback, he could put up 140, 150 targets. That being said, we got Arthur Smith coming in, and Najee Harris is there, and we know how much Arthur Smith likes to slam
Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, still have Deontay Johnson, still have Pat Freiermuth. I mean, more competition for targets than what Drake London had in Atlanta. That's not the bet I'm making. Next up came one pick later, number 53 overall was Alec Pierce, went to the Colts. We saw him kind of ebb down a little bit in his second year. I thought there was some opportunity there, but started 16 games, only saw 65 targets, caught 32 for 514 and 2 touchdowns. Michael Pittman, obviously the number 1, getting the franchise tag. Dennis, honestly, I'd rather have Josh Downs, I think, than Alec Pierce.
Yeah, because I think that Downs, the role he plays as the slot receiver who can go deep, is more of a fit as the second receiver to Michael Pittman. I think Pierce is going to be a guy that flashes, that has some good games where he catches plenty of passes with good yardage and a touchdown. But he's going to be the 3, I think, after Pittman and Downs. And then you've got Jonathan Taylor, who's a capable pass catcher. I don't know what they're going to do at tight end. I don't think it matters. But Richardson needs to, I just think for him to support 3 wide receivers and Jonathan Taylor, Richardson has to run less and throw more. And I just don't think you take a 6'5", 245-pound quarterback with Richardson's athletic ability and have him run less. Maybe theoretically they go into it saying, we're going to run you less. But when he sees green in front of him, I don't think you can stop him from taking off.
Next up, Kansas City Chiefs took Sky Moore, number 54 overall in the second round. He's been relatively consistent through both years, but none of that has been great. Caught 22 for 250 as a rookie, caught 21 for 244 and a touchdown in his second year. I am out on trying to make Sky Moore happen.
I think I'm further out on Sky Moore than I am Treylon Burks.
Well, because the one thing I'll say for Burks, there's still not a ton of competition.
Right.
Anything else to add about Rashee Rice is everything we had thought maybe we'd get from Sky Moore. I just don't think it's going to happen. Sky Moore and his running buddy there, Kadarius Toney, are two guys I'm out on from Kansas City. Next up, Romeo Doubs went in the fourth round. I mentioned I like him better than his draft mate Christian Watson. He saw 96 targets last year, caught 59 for 674 yards and 8 touchdowns. I like Jaden Reed the best among the Packers wide receivers, but I like Doubs in that wide receiver 4 range. I think he has week-to-week starting value.
Yeah, he's a flex guy with upside. Good route runner. He doesn't have. He's not as bursty as Jaden Reed, so he isn't quite as quick. Doesn't have the raw speed that Christian Watson does. He doesn't have the strength that Dontavian Wicks does. But he's just one of those guys that does everything pretty well. So it feels like he's always going to be. He's going to be right now. He's the number 1 that you really wish was your number 2, but there's just nobody else there that's stepping up to be that alpha wide receiver. Maybe Jaden Reed does, but right now I think I'm at the point where none of the receivers here have shown me their wide receiver 1s. They're all kind of.
You mean? In Green Bay, you mean?
Yeah, I think they're. Can they be? Maybe. But it feels like the way the team was constructed, that Jordan Love is going to have chemistry with most of these guys, and he's going to be, a super spreader type of quarterback. He isn't going to force feed it to one guy like Rodgers did to Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson before that. And he's going to go where the defense has the opening, and in any given week, it could be Dobbs, it could be Reed, it could be Wicks, it could be Musgrave, could be Watson, and that's going to provide inconsistency that's going to be a little bit frustrating for fantasy managers. But as your wide receiver 3, I think I can live with that production.
Next up, Calvin Austin also went in the 4th round, number 138 overall. I bring him up. We haven't seen a ton. Last year, he only saw 30 targets, got 17 for 180. Also had 11 carries for 57 and a touchdown. But he's kind of that gadgety kind of wide receiver that also can be used in the running game that we've seen Arthur Smith use before. Any interest in him as a stash?
I mean, he's going to be at best the wide receiver 3, and most likely pass target number 5 behind Pickens and Johnson and Freiermuth and Harris/Warren. So it's
and maybe Johnny Smith if they bring him in.
He unfortunately he's going to be a guy that you see every once in a while pop off with a big play, but it's probably not going to even be consistent in game. And he's 5'8", he's a little bitty dude. So he's more of a special teams guy.
Last of the wide receivers, Khalil Shakir went in the 5th round, 148 overall to Buffalo. We saw him start to come on at the end of last year, ended up seeing 45 targets, caught 39 for 611 yards and 2 touchdowns. Every possibility that Buffalo adds to the wide receiver room, which I think would knock him back. But he's kind of a speculative hang for me, in a wide receiver 5-6 with some potential upside.
So Buffalo is in a situation where we're asking ourselves, how concerned are we with Stephon Diggs second half of 2023? Because it isn't like Buffalo just stopped throwing the ball. They still threw the ball last year. But you got Dalton Kincaid, who's productive. Gabe Davis is going to be gone. I think Shakir is, as of right now, he's going into 2024 as the wide receiver 2. They're going to add to it. He's suited for a limited role, but that doesn't mean he can't be productive. He could be, your wide receiver 4 or 5 on your fantasy team that is going to get you a consistent, 6 to 10, 11 points each week. And at your wide receiver 4 or 5, I think, you'll take that.
Before we get out of here, we're going to dive into the tight ends. First up is Trey McBride, who was the top tight end taken in this class. He went number 55 overall in the second round. Didn't do a ton as a rookie, but last year really exploded. Started 12 games, played in all 17, saw 106 targets, 81 receptions, 825 yards, 3 touchdowns. Zach Ertz is gone. I like him as nucleus of the pass offense there. I like him as a tight end 1.
He has the potential to be the tight end 1. I just don't know that with Kyler Murray that they can get it done. But Jonathan Gannon comes out of Philadelphia where they ran tight end heavy offenses. So, he has that going for him. Marquise Brown is a free agent. They have Michael Wilson left over from last year, and
Rondale
Moore is, speaking of gadget guys, he's as gadgety as they come. So the mock drafts have them taking Marvin Harrison at 4, which is great. I feel like I have been so down on Kyler Murray for so long that I'm almost coming around and being like, maybe I kind of like Murray this year. And Jonathan Gannon had a peculiar first press conference and team meetings. There was videos of him being fairly awkward, but the team played hard for him last year. And it seems like he's got them rolling in the right direction. And Drew Petzing seems like he's put together an offense that plays to the team's strengths. If they can pull the offensive line together, then maybe there's going to be a decent amount of fantasy production there. I could see Trey McBride being the tight end 1, but I would probably expect him to be top 5, top 6 maybe.
The second tight end that went in this class, third round, 73 overall, was Jelani Woods. Missed the entire 2023 season with injury. He's not a guy I'm rostering at this point.
Yeah, there's no there.
The third tight end off the board went number 80 overall in the third round was Greg Dulcich. Went to Denver, caught 33 for 411, but was limited to 6 games as a rookie. Didn't even see the field that much last year. Only 1 start, saw 4 targets, 3 receptions, 25 yards. He's another guy that struggled to stay healthy. And given some of the talk in Denver, I'm going to say I'm actually out on Greg Dulcich.
It's hard to be in. He isn't seeing the field, can't stay healthy, and the coach seems to dislike him. So
yeah, not a winning combination. The other third-round tight end taken 101 overall was Jeremy Ruckert. Didn't do anything as a rookie, but last year did get on a little bit, saw 22 targets, 16 receptions, 151 yards. Tyler Conklin seemed to be kind of the number 1 tight end there. We just mentioned they let go of Uzoma. Is this, is Ruckert a guy you're still kind of stashing to see how it all shakes out?
Yeah, he played 48% of the snaps last year. That's going to go up. Whether he surpasses Tyler Conklin or not, I don't know. Conklin wasn't known as a receiving tight end in Minnesota. He was a tight end that caught some passes sometimes. I don't think under Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, the tight end isn't going to be a featured part of the offense anyways. But I could see Ruckert, moving into the lead tight end role. And while you don't want your tight end blocking for fantasy, you do want the tight end on the field. And if they're going to run one tight end offense, then I want Ruckert out there. He's still a tight end 2 at best, I think. Going into year 3, we'll see if he can step up and take over the starting position.
Next up, Cade Otton went in the 4th round, number 106 overall. Had a decent rookie year, stepped up even more in year 2, saw 67 targets, caught 47 for 455 yards and 4 touchdowns. They have a good little offense there. I like him in the tight end 2 range.
Yeah, for Otton, it just comes down to, is he going to get any volume? Only getting 67 targets last year. See, what's his snap count? That can't be right. Where did it go? So let's see. He played 97% of the snaps last year. So he's going to be on the field. He had a couple games that, he caught some touchdowns. I like Otton as a backup on my fantasy team. And then we'll see what happens. Can he develop? Is he good? He looks the part. He's going to get the opportunity to be out there. The biggest challenge for Otton is that Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rashad White, Russell Gage is coming back. Trey Palmer's there.
I don't know if they'll bring. I thought Gage only had a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I thought I heard earlier he was still under contract.
No. Either way, I'm not expecting a lot of that. We shall see. Next up, 4th round, 112 overall was Daniel Bellinger, and he had some moments as a rookie. Last year, they brought in Darren Waller, but Waller missed time. He ended up catching 25 passes for 255 yards, no touchdowns. Wasn't a great Giants pass offense. To me, he might be a stash because we don't know what's going to happen with Waller for sure.
Yeah, it's weird. The questions around, is Waller retiring or is he not retiring? I was high on Bellinger after his rookie year. He looked like he was ready to be a thing. Did that mean he was going to be a tight end 1? No, it meant that he could be because he was going to play. His snaps dropped from 72% to 62% last year. If Waller goes away, I think Bellinger steps right back in. I think Daboll is comfortable with him. He's been around a couple years now. When he got forced into starting as a rookie, he held his own. And I think that last year, with the trouble they had with the quarterback position and the entire team kind of crapping the bed, not having any wide receivers,
Waller missed a ton of time last year too, because I would say the danger is if Waller doesn't retire and can actually be healthy, that snap percentage will probably go even further down.
Yeah, and that's the risk you take. But it feels like that Otton at some – so you know what Brett Favre – I think it was Brett Favre said, or Ben Roethlisberger said. Somebody said, if you're talking about retirement, you're already retired. And so if Waller's starting to talk about retirement – he might play this year, but your dings get a little dingier, your bruises get a little bruisier, your soreness gets a little sorer, and it takes you a little longer to recover. Where you might have missed a game before, now you're missing 3. Like, what's the rush?
Next up, 4th round, 129 overall is Jake Ferguson, who went to the Dallas Cowboys, and nobody had a bigger year 2 jump than Jake Ferguson. Sprung into the starting role with Dalton Schultz in Houston. So for Dallas, he started the whole season, 102 targets, 71 receptions, 761 yards, 5 touchdowns. Looks like he's going to roll in as a starter again in year 3. I like him as a low-end tight end 1.
Yeah, I would expect more of the same. They've got an offense that isn't going to undergo a ton of changes. They're going to add a running back. Pollard is a free agent, so I don't know that they go into the free agent class and add somebody. It feels like they need 2 players, so maybe they add somebody that's better than Rico Dowdle, and maybe they draft a rookie that can be their starter the next few years, at least the duration of their the rookie contract. So whether that's a Trey Benson or a Jonathan, is it Brooks?
Yeah.
Whether it's one of those guys. I don't. But then Jerry gets kind of squirrely sometimes, so I could see him. He might draft a Braylon Allen or Blake Corum. He may draft Braylon Allen and Blake Corum because he likes watching them stand next to each other.
Maybe. I still think they're going to make a run at Derrick Henry, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Next up in the tight ends, also 4th round, 139 overall, Isaiah Likely. And, his path to a clear starting role is blocked by a guy named Mark Andrews, who's pretty darn good. But we've seen flashes in both years from him, 36 for 373 and 3 touchdowns as a rookie, caught 30 for 411 and 5 touchdowns in year 2. Do you think he is mostly valuable as I feel like he should be rostered? Is he mostly valuable kind of as a handcuff? Do you think he maybe works onto the field more 2 tight end formations for the Ravens?
So the Ravens run a lot of 2 tight end. They just only throw it to one of them. And so, he may be on the field a lot. If Andrews is healthy, right now he's splitting the tight end 2 role with Charlie Kolar. And Kolar, I liked him coming out of college too. But Mark Andrews is he's the centerpiece of that passing offense. So as long as he's healthy, it's tough to look at Likely as anything more than a handcuff.
Last of the tight ends, 4th round, 143 overall, Chig Okonkwo went to the Titans. He pretty much took over as their starting tight end last year, saw 77 targets, caught 54 passes, 528 yards, and a touchdown. A lot of questions about that pass offense, but I like him as a tight end too in Dynasty.
He's got the athletic ability to have tight end 1 upside. It's hard to do when you have the quarterback situation they've had the last couple of years. I'm not opposed. I don't want to have Okonkwo as my starter, but I like him as my tight end too, and somebody that could become my starter if Will Levis pans out. So he's probably going to be in the mid to low tight end 2 range for me. In part because I haven't seen enough consistency out of him. Part of that's been the offense, the quarterback play. We'll see what happens when this offense, gets fully installed with the new coaching staff.
We shall see. Well, that's a wrap on the class of 22 pass catchers and today's episode. We will be back on Friday. We are in the midst of running a full Dynasty mock draft right now. We will be breaking that down on Friday. Thanks to everyone who jumped in and is participating with us. We'll hope to wrap that up here in the next couple of days. It's been a lot of fun to kind of get out there. I tried a strategy I've never done before, but I don't know how I feel yet. I guess I'll know in a little while, but should be fun to talk about nonetheless. If people are looking to fill some of those long, lonely days between now and Friday, they could do their own mock drafts. But while they're doing those mock drafts, Dennis, what should they be listening to?
Should be listening to us here at the Fantasy Football Roundtable. Go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that like and subscribe button. Go tell 2 friends and let them tell 2 friends, and they'll tell 2 friends, and they'll tell 2 friends, like the old hair commercial.
There you go. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you guys on Friday, talking a little bit